never believed in ghosts or black magic. I was a man of logic, a firm believer in science. But what happened to me one summer changed my perspective forever. To this day, I wish I had never stepped foot into that house. It started when I moved to a small town in England for work. The town had an eerie silence at night, and the locals were strangely superstitious. They spoke of spirits and curses, but I laughed it off until I rented that house on the outskirts. The rent was suspiciously cheap, and the owner was eager to get a tenant. "Just one rule," he said, avoiding eye contact. "Never go to the backyard after midnight." I chuckled at the absurdity of it and agreed. It wasn't until much later that I would realize how deadly that warning was. For the first few nights, everything seemed normal. The house was old but sturdy, with wooden beams creaking under every step. The air inside smelled musty, like something that had been locked away for too long. But it was spacious, and I was happy with the deal I had gotten. Then the oddities began. At first, they were small. I would misplace things, only to find them in places I was sure I hadn't left them. The lights flickered occasionally, but I blamed the old wiring. The town often suffered from power fluctuations, so I didn't think much of it. But then, I would wake up at exactly 3:13 a.m. every night, drenched in sweat, feeling a suffocating weight on my chest. My dreams became unsettling, visions of twisted shadows creeping along the walls, whispers in an unfamiliar language. I tried to dismiss them as nightmares, but the feeling of something watching me never faded. One evening, I met an elderly shopkeeper in the market who seemed to recognize me. "You're staying in that house, aren't you?" he asked, his voice low. When I nodded, his expression darkened. "You should leave. That place is cursed." I laughed nervously and asked him why everyone in town seemed so afraid of it. He hesitated before telling me a story. Many years ago, a woman named Eleanor lived there. She was accused of practicing black magic. The villagers believed she could control spirits, summon the dead, and curse those who wronged her. One day they had enough. They dragged her to the woods and burned her alive. But she swore she would return, and some say she never really left. A cold shiver ran down my spine, but I refused to let superstition control me. I thanked the old man and walked away, determined to prove that there was nothing wrong with my house. That night, the whispers grew louder. I woke up, heart pounding. The entire room felt different, colder, darker. The shadows seemed to shift unnaturally. My eyes darted to the corner of the room, where a dark figure stood, motionless. My breath caught in my throat. Then it moved. The figure stepped closer, the dim light revealing its form. A woman draped in a tattered black dress, her face obscured by a thick veil. Her hands were elongated, fingers twisted unnaturally, nails like claws. She raised an arm, and the lights flickered violently. My body felt paralyzed, held down by an unseen force. A guttural whisper filled the air, sending a shudder through my spine. Then, everything went black. When I woke up, I was lying on the floor. The clock read 3:13 a.m., but that was just the beginning. The next night, I locked every door and window, determined to prevent another encounter. But as soon as the clock struck 3:13 a.m., the air in my room became ice cold. My breath came out in misty puffs. Then the scratching started. It came from inside the walls, long, drawn-out scraping sounds, as if nails were raking against the wooden beams. Then came the laughter. It was distant at first, echoing through the hallway. A low, guttural chuckle that didn't belong to anything human. My body stiffened as it grew louder, closer. I turned toward the door, watching in horror as the handle twisted violently. The door banged against the frame, as though something was desperately trying to get in. Summoning every ounce of courage, I ran to grab the holy pendant my mother had given me. The moment I clasped it, the banging stopped. The room fell eerily silent. But when I turned to the mirror, my reflection didn't move. My blood ran cold. The reflection in the mirror was grinning. A wicked, knowing smile. Its eyes were black, empty voids. And then, in a whisper that sent ice through my veins, it said, "You let me in." I screamed and smashed the mirror, shards flying everywhere. The second the glass shattered, the air in the room lightened. The temperature returned to normal, and I could finally move again. I barely slept that night, my mind racing. What had I brought upon myself? The next morning, I noticed something new. The walls had faint carvings on them, symbols I didn't recognize. Desperate for answers, I returned to the shopkeeper. This time, he took me to an old priest. The priest examined my house, his face growing darker with each step. "This house is a beacon for dark energy," he murmured. "Eleanor was more than just a witch. She made a pact with something far worse. When the villagers killed her, they didn't just end her life. They unleashed something beyond their understanding." He performed a cleansing ritual, chanting ancient verses as he sprinkled holy water around. For the first time in weeks, I felt relief. But before he left, he warned me. "You must leave. This presence is too strong. It won't rest." I didn't need another warning. I packed my bags that night, but as I left, I felt a deep, searing gaze upon me. When I looked back at the house one last time, I saw her. Eleanor stood in the backyard, her veil lifted. Her hollow, black eyes bore into mine. She didn't speak, but I heard her voice inside my head, cold and unforgiving. "This is my home. You will never escape me." I fled, but I was wrong to think I was safe. Even in my new apartment, I continued waking at 3:13 a.m. Strange symbols appeared on my walls, written in something dark and sticky. Then one night I saw her again. I woke up to my room filled with black smoke. The air was thick with the scent of burning flesh. Eleanor stood at the foot of my bed, her face now fully visible, charred, flesh peeling, her mouth stretching unnaturally wide as she grinned. "Did you really think you could leave?" she rasped. My body was paralyzed, my breath shallow. Then she lunged. I don't remember what happened next. I woke up outside my apartment, my hands covered in soot, my room destroyed. But the worst part, my mirror was intact again, and in the reflection, Eleanor stood behind me, her hand reaching for my shoulder. Some spirits never rest, and some curses never break.